It's three guys who combined to play 15 seasons in the National Football League trenches. Well, two guys. And Mackey, who didn't do shit. This is the O-Line Committee.
Yes, Jeremiah, back from an 8-day road trip. How long were you on the road, dude?
8 days, 2,500 miles, and 48 hours in the car with 3 children and my wife. I am happy to be home, to say the least.
Man. God's country, breathing in that fresh American air.
Absolutely. I mean, I got to see Yellowstone, Teton National Park, Devil's Tower, swung down, saw my parents on the way. My wife's parents came with. Overall, it was a great trip, but I have no desire to get in the car again anytime soon, even though I'm going to get in next week and drive to Drake, North Dakota. So I got another 20 hours in my very near future.
The life of a traveling football agent. So Booney's out this week. Family obligations.
Yep, that's a fine. It's
he clowned you for like 10 minutes to start
he went
the show
off on me. That's a no stress, no travel fine for Booney too, and he can wear that.
Yeah. So we'll get him back in the mix next week. But we've been doing this show now, the O-Line Committee. Thank you guys for getting us to 20,000 YouTube subscribers. We appreciate you. Click that like button and the subscribe button if you haven't already. But we've been threatening for like 6 months. We're going to get guests on this show at some point. And by golly, we have our first ever guest on the O-Line Committee podcast. Spent 6 years in the NFL trenches, Patriots, Cardinals, Chargers, where he met a young Jeremiah Sirles as a rookie, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's now a media star. You can find him mornings on San Diego Sports 760, weekends on Fox Sports Radio. He's an all-around good guy. His name is Rich Ohrnberger. Welcome to the O-Line Committee, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be on with you. And Jeremiah, I was listening to the show intro. People don't realize this who don't have kids, but there is no such thing as vacationing once you have a couple of kids. You're taking trips.
Trips. Yeah, it's not a vacation. It is a trip. It is work. It's a work trip. And first of all, Richie, I got to do it, but that's a late fine. You were supposed to be. That's a late fine. I'm just going to throw that out there. I know
that's on me. That's on me.
From one ledger to another. I was the ledger when I left and went to Minnesota. I learned from the best. He was the ledger in San Diego for the fine system. So we're all here together, but gotta give it where it can take it.
I was the worst, by the way. I was the worst ledger of all time because people. I mean, first of all, I'm the most disorganized human being when it comes to. I mean. Look, I told you guys, I'm like, I got pulled into this meeting. It's a scheduled meeting. Like, I knew what time this meeting that I got pulled into was, and I knew it was probably going to run up against, or at very least potentially over into the time that I've allotted for this. Now, I'm free for however long you need me now. But my wife constantly complains about this. When I was a ledger with the Chargers marking down fines, you probably paid hundreds of dollars more than you were supposed to, because I would just be like, Jeremiah feels light. We're just gonna add a couple tallies.
Yeah, we've implemented the bell system is fully implemented on the show, and it's fantastic. We've gone through it with the palms up and the sensitives. And
sensitive probably gets the most action, I would say.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we had when we were in San Diego with Fluke, we had a Flukies fine that was just for DJ Fluker. Like, it was literally a direct fine just for him. It was incredible.
DJ Fluker was a different breed, man. I mean, what a specimen. Dude could lift the world, run fast as hell. He was like a jungle cat trapped in a giant man's body. Like, he was really a fluid athlete at 340 pounds or whatever he carried on that hulking frame. But yeah, like, he had all these mannerisms, and personality traits that led him getting into so much trouble with that bell. I mean, there were times where the bell rang, upwards of a couple dozen times, and it would just be DJ Fluker. Yeah.
Well, I want to start with this question to both you guys. And I'd love to hear stories about what young Jeremiah was like coming fresh out of Nebraska land with the Chargers. But what is it like for those of us that never spent time in NFL meeting rooms, in offensive line meeting rooms? What is something about offensive linemen in the NFL, Rich, that the common fan, the idiots like me, should know more about? Like, that should respect you more for, or that if you could pull back the curtain, what's like one thing about offensive line rooms in the NFL that we should know about on the outside?
It's the funnest group and I know I'm speaking from a standpoint of biasy because I played offensive line, but it's the group that everybody does want to hang with because, you know, we're hard drinkers, we're shit talkers. I don't know if we can curse on this podcast.
Oh,
You're good.
No,
You're good.
Boone drops about 30 F-bombs per an episode, so you're fine.
We have a quota sometimes of like 3 for him, and then he generally blows
by
past
in the first
it.
3 minutes.
Every offensive line room I've been in, it's basically check your feelings at the door. We're going to have a good time here, and we're going to mash some people up, and we're going to do all the things we're told to do, but we're going to have a good time. And so, yeah, like the bell, the fine for being too sensitive, like that's to me, that's to help, not to hurt. We're not looking to take money out of your pocket. We're just going to create a space where everybody feels free to say whatever the hell's on their mind. And if you're offended, well, shit, you're out of luck because it's the wrong room for you then. And I love that aspect about the offensive line because what does that remind you of? It reminds you of family. It reminds you of a brotherhood. And that's really what it has to be. You have to be like-minded, even though you come from different backgrounds. You have to be caring and considerate for each other, even though sometimes you're not really getting along with everybody. And the most important thing is the common ground, right? You know, whether it's communication or it's evaluating or problem solving together, you got to see everything through the same lens. And so communication is everything. So yeah, to pull back the curtain for anybody who wants to know what it's like being in an offensive line room, it's a lot of talking. Like you have usually your best talkers on your team are in the offensive line room.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I mean, you don't usually those aren't the guys that are in front of the cameras, right? Because no one really wants to talk to us. But like, if you need a temperature control of the team, usually you go to the O-line room. Like, right, they'll be like, "Hey, how's everyone doing? You guys all good? Everyone hanging in all right?" And you just like it's like, okay, no one's good. Everyone's in a bad mood, right? Or like the O-line coach comes in and he'll shut the door and be like, "Oh boy, here we go." Like it is such a family oriented. I think it's because, and Boone and I have talked about this too, Rich. Like we're our own ecosystem within the team. Like everyone else kind of is the individual basis, the stats, the this, but like we're in our own room and there's usually like 8 to 10 guys in that room. And like when it's bad, we are just wearing it. We're just eating it, dude. And then when it's good, everyone's like, yeah, leave the pigs in their room alone. Like they're fine. But like, it's just that common ground. Like Rich said, like we have to be our own up and down, steady, whatever it is, just because we're never going to get the notoriety or whatever it is, but we will eat all the shit if it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember cutting my teeth into the league back in 2009 when I was drafted by the Patriots. It was an awkward situation we were walking into, and we didn't realize it. But myself and Sebastian Vollmer, who was a second-round draft pick that year in 2009, and George Bussey, he was coming out of Louisville. He was, I believe, maybe a fifth rounder. I forget. I was a fourth rounder. We were there to replace some folks. And we're coming to a New England team that had a pretty set culture in that room. A lot of guys with a lot of starts under their belt, not a lot of changeover for a bunch of years. You know, certain guys came and went. Maybe they were playing for different teams now, but there was a core in place. And we were essentially there to start pushing into that starting rotation. And there was a little discomfort at first, right? You know, and it felt like certain players had their guard up, especially, you know, some veterans who had valuable information that you're trying to tap into. You're like, oh gosh, like how are things done? Like, you know, you have all these questions, whether they're vague questions or specific questions, and you feel like you don't necessarily have that resource at first. And then eventually it's impossible for this not to happen. You start to get invited to a barbecue or two, or, you know, you grab a burger with a couple of the veterans and they realize like, all right, he's not just a draft pick here to take my job. He's like a funny kid from Penn State and he's a good hang. And so you almost like wear people down to the point where now you're all just friends. And even though in certain cases there's position battles happening or you're fighting for playing time with certain guys and they're aware of it and you're aware of it, you still walk away from the field feeling like you got to hang out with your best friends for a while. And so, yeah, that culture inside the offensive line room, it is unique. and it's close. And like Jeremiah said, it's almost like a bunker mentality. Like, you know, when things are going bad, everybody like get in your places. It's battle stations. And when things are going good, you know, you kind of get left alone to your own devices. So you're almost, you know, an isolated microcosm of the rest of the football team.
Jay, were you trying to take Rich's job? Like,
No.
was that the
No.
dynamic, or what
No,
was?
I was. So Richie's short. No offense, Rich, but Richie's a shorter guy. He was the interior. He was the center. I was a tackle at that point. I hadn't been played poor enough to move in yet. You know, that's how they all start you outside and then they slow you, move you in. Ended my career at center, right? So I was still playing tackle at that point. But no, one thing I appreciated about that 2014 room was there really wasn't any of those like dickhead vets that weren't going to help you, right? Like Nick Hardwick was still there. Richie was a vet, Chad Reinhardt, like King Dunlap. Like there was a lot of dudes in that room who we drafted Chris Watt, who was a third rounder, who was there because Nick was on his back end of his career. They're like, hey, we want to be the future center. But like, I didn't walk into a room that like guys were like, don't bother me, don't talk to me, don't look at me. And, you know, the more I talk to some of my guys that I have going into the league now, there's a little more of that, I feel like, in today's era of NFL than ever before, just because of the like your branding, your building, you're trying to like be the guy, and if you feel like you're competing, you don't want to bring someone with you. But that 14 O-line room was really a great starting place for me as a rookie, just because it was such a great room.
I appreciate hearing you say that because, look, Nick Hardwick, I have a tremendous amount of respect for, but we were cut from the same cloth. I think Nick hated bullies. You know, and so did I. And we had conversations about this, about how, you know, in order for this group to have success, all ships have to rise with the tide. And, you know, Nick, I think, was fully aware that, you know, I was young enough and capable enough to take over whenever it was his time. And I knew the score. I knew that, I mean, he's a legendary Chargers center. There was going to be no stepping on those toes. And so I was happy to play where they needed me to play and to start some games when injuries occurred. But my hope was to be next in line. That season, things got derailed from a standpoint of injury.
Oh my gosh, dude. That season was bananas from an injury standpoint. I mean, what was it? Game 1 where Nick went out?
Game 1, he had the neck. And then game, 2 or 3, my back started going. And that was a problem that followed us for a couple of games. And we had spot starts from Chris Watt, and he hurt himself, I think. And then Trevor Robinson.
No, Doug Legursky.
Doug
Legursky came in, tore his ACL.
He tore his ACL. I mean, I think we started either 6 or 7 different centers.
Yeah.
Just one position on the offensive line. I think we started them. It was a nightmare. But going back to the offseason before we knew what that season had waiting for us, that culture you were talking about, I think it's the only way to do it. Now, I'm sure there are people who argue like, competition is good and we need guys, fighting each other for playing shit. In my opinion, the best teams I've ever been a part of have been collaborative efforts, each piece working toward the whole, all that stuff. And it sounds really hokey. And, I mean, Jeremiah would call me out if I was bullshitting, but like any question Jeremiah had, I wanted to answer. I wanted to answer to the best of my ability because I figured if his play improved, that's a better reflection on me as a team leader rather than be worried about like Chris Watt or one of these other younger guys. We played with a guy, I'm blanking on his last name, but Craig
Watts.
For a little while.
Craig Watts.
Craig Watts, that's right. Thank you. Craig Watts, like another guy who was trying to help. I mean, and these guys were playing the same position, but again, the whole gets stronger when the pieces work better together. So that was the goal, and I'm glad it worked. I'm glad you felt that way about that season.
Yeah, and the big reason for me is because I got traded after the 15th training camp, right? I got traded to Minnesota, and I walked into a room as, like you were saying, like brand new, no training camp, like nothing, and all of a sudden, like no one was your friend because the vets that you got a vet cut because you got traded for. And then all the younger guys are like, well, they traded for him, so they obviously don't want me on their practice squad. Like, and it was just such a completely different vibe that I walked into than the San Diego vibe. And I think that's just part of circumstances of when you come into an O-line room, because like Rich said, we're our own bunker ecosystem. And then you take someone who had not been in there, who had not, clap it on, Rich. Clap it on, Rich. Who had, like, you take someone from the ecosystem that has not been there for training camp, not been there for OTAs during all this time, like Rich was saying, going to the barbecue, and you throw them in there week one. Like, it's just such a weird deal. And like, that felt really out of place for me. And that was a tough year for me in 15, coming from a place that I loved in San Diego, and then get randomly traded at the end of the year, and then realizing I would end up starting week one at halftime when Fluker rolled his ankle against the Lions. Like, it was just such a weird deal for me going to Minnesota from San Diego.
Yeah. It's weird. And I'm sure, Phil, you know, you've been a part of this a couple times in leadership roles around your career. And when you're parachuted into a situation where you're supposed to be either a role player or a leader as a part of a team, it doesn't matter. It's hard to make the puzzle pieces fit at first. Like, you just sort of feel like the odd man out for a while, even if you're hired to have people listen to you, or, you know, you're supposed to be something better than what this organization had prior to your time there. It's an uncomfortable thing. I always tell people, like, playing offensive line, you know, the versatility you need to have to play right guard versus left guard. Well, start brushing your teeth with your left hand for a week if you're right hand dominant. See how comfortable that feels. And then report back after a week, after a month, after 2 months, 6 months. You know, I mean, but that discomfort, it's not just in the positions you play on the offensive line. It's also in situations like Jeremiah, you were just describing, or Phil, I'm sure, where your career has taken you. Man, when you're parachuted in, you got to get over those initial, you know, like, hell, at first you got to figure out where the bathrooms are, or, you know, like where the cold tub is. And then you can start remembering some names of, you know, teammates, and then maybe a couple of names of some of the trainers you're working with. It's a process.
Yeah. So just to back up here. So Jeremiah has told some epic Philip Rivers stories just from, 10 years ago. Rich, you played with Philip Rivers and early with Tom Brady. 2009, like 2010 Tom Brady. Do you have any, what is the Philip Rivers and or Tom Brady experience like from an offensive lineman standpoint? Do you have any stories that pop to mind?
Oh, yeah, tons. I mean, blanket statement, playing with quarterbacks like those, you feel like you have a chance in every single game. There's a different attitude around a building because you're playing with, in the case of Philip Rivers or Tom Brady, a top 10 quarterback, a top 5 quarterback, depending on the week, depending on the year. You're playing with a guy who can win you a Super Bowl if you do the other things right. And so that feeling of, man, we have a chance because we have one of those special few, there's nothing like it, and you especially are aware of it when you don't have it. But yeah, I mean, Philip, I say this all the time, was the best teammate I ever had. No offense, Jeremiah.
Fair. No, I'd agree.
But when you look at a guy like that who's in a position he's in, for him to know so much about every single player on the roster and to understand backgrounds and to understand the convergence points where, maybe the system you came from, how to relay things to you, like he was a brilliant teacher. And you could tell he was the son of a coach because he just knew how to teach. And that's the reason why he's coaching now, because it was his life's work anyways. It's what he was doing in the NFL. And then in terms of Tom Brady, I've never been on the football field with, as a teammate, a more brilliant football mind. The guy, he just knew everything. But it felt like he could see into the future at times. And Bill Belichick was the most brilliant football mind I've ever been around. He'll forget more about football than most people will ever learn who spend a life dedicated to the sport. But having those two at the same time in the same building, I mean, it just felt like, going to Harvard, like, or an Ivy League football education, I guess is the best way I could describe it. You were on the fast track to learning the sport in a very nuanced, specific way that was applicable throughout the rest of my career.
Yeah, you on the Tom Brady front. So he's about to make like $300 million over 10 years now as a broadcaster, and he's been going through kind of the initial, he's doing the media rounds now. Week 1, I think it's Cowboys Browns is his first game. How do you think it's going to translate for him? Do you think he's going to wind up being really good? I mean, Tony Romo stepped in and was, in his own Tony Romo way, brilliant in a much different way, I think, than Tom Brady's going to be. How do you think Tom's going to do in the broadcasting career?
I think he's going to be brilliant because, as you can tell, look, I mean, so what's been sneaky about Tom Brady is he's been getting the reps. We don't realize it because, we're just kind of following along this career. But he started the production company for a reason. He started the podcast with Jim Gray for a reason. He started showing up in media and broadcast and doing more interviews and
documentaries and stuff. Yeah.
He's doing all those things and speaking engagements. How many clips from a public speaking engagement have you seen where he's speaking to the crowd or speaking into the camera, like staring down the barrel of the lens, and you're feeling motivated from a tertiary standpoint? You're looking at a phone. You're a million miles away and probably a year away from that speech. And you feel like you could run through a fucking brick wall for the guy because his words have impact and he's so passionate about the sport. He's a long study at this. And so I think he's been quietly taking the reps he needs. And then also, by the way, with the year off from football, I don't think I would guarantee that Fox has had him call games. Obviously those will never see the light of day. Those were practice runs, but who knows, college football games or pro football games that they had him study for, where he's in a booth that's all blacked out. Nobody knows he's there, or maybe they did it from a studio and set it up to create as much of a game atmosphere as they possibly could, working alongside his new play-by-play voice. But there's no question about it. He's going to be the most prepared person in the room because that's how he's attacked every single thing from a performance-based standpoint he's ever attacked in his life. I think he's going to be great at it.
You've made the transition into that kind of broadcasting. I know you called the San Diego Aztec games. Like, how do you feel like that translates from the NFL and from our ability to see the field so differently, but then to like dumb it down so you're not sounding too ridiculous? Like, was that a hard transition for you, or how did that work?
A little bit. What I started doing when I realized that this was something I was really interested in, because admittedly, it's not something I thought I was going to do. And when I was asked to jump on and be the color analyst for San Diego State football, I didn't balk at the opportunity, but I did tell them, could I think about it? I said, I'm very interested, but can I think about it? And they gave me some time, and I obviously agreed to it. And it's been 8 extremely pleasant seasons since doing that. And I've gotten to live in one of the greatest cities in the world in San Diego while I'm doing it. So that doesn't hurt either. But yeah, what I started doing is I would watch games with people who I knew didn't know football that well. And I would start explaining things that I was seeing on the screen. And I would even tell them sometimes, like, look, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. And because again, like, our whole life was about just getting as many reps as possible. Mm-hmm. Also, this is going to sound crazy, but like, I talk to myself a lot. Like, I will call games. I'll turn the television on mute and I'll call games that I'm not a part of. So if it's a random Sunday night football game and it's, Steelers Eagles, I'm going to break down how they ran, cheap trap at the goal line. Like,
do you do the Collinsworth slide in too when you're on your own, or?
Yeah, hey Al, we got a good one here. I mean, Mahomes, he's gonna be primed and ready to take the field. The ankle's looking a little jerky at pregame, but we'll see how it goes.
Here's a guy.
Here's a guy.
I do. By the way, Collinsworth, I mean, who's smoother than Collinsworth? I know he wears it because he loves quarterbacks, but I mean, there's a comfort. It's like a warm blanket. You know what I mean? The best broadcasters, when you're ready to watch some football and you hear, the boom of an Al Michaels introduction, or the casual approach, kind of the winding gravel road that Collinsworth is taking it down.
Yes.
I realize they've broken up, and you got Al with Herbstreit and Tirico with Collinsworth.
They're trying to keep Al awake.
How do you feel about Herbstreit in the NFL? I'm not a fan. I love him for college. Listen, I love Kirk for college. But when you see him on Thursday night, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about.
It's what's crazy is I have so much respect for his knowledge of football, but that statement I just made, like that warm blanket that you're your favorite pair of sneakers, I'm not a slippers guy, but I assume it's great when you have a well-worn pair of slippers. I'm more of a flip-flops guy. I live in San Diego.
What do you have against slippers, man? I suppose when you're in San Diego,
75 and sunny every day.
I mean, listen, if somebody's coming into your house to attack you, do you want to defend yourself in slippers?
Is that your bar? Okay, if somebody invades my house, is what I'm wearing going to be enough for me to chase this person down?
I fight naked, Phil, if that's the question. The answer is yes. I fight naked. If it was good enough for the Romans, it's good enough for me.
That's right.
Like the Herbstreit voice on Thursday Night Football and Pro Football, it's not a well-worn groove yet, right? And I think that's like, listen, we all grew up, I'm sure, at different points listening to our favorite, talk show radio hosts, or broadcasters, sportscasters, sports talk, whatever it was. Like, we're all doing this for a reason. So we probably had people who we respected or listened to. And that's the feeling. It's the familiarity that is missing on Thursday Night Football. But it'll grow. If they stick with Herbstreit, I promise you, in a half decade, it'll feel like you'll know it's Thursday night when you hear Herbstreit's voice. And it just takes time because he's talented. He just isn't familiar yet.
I prefer the throaty comfort of a Kenny Albert, a noon game on Fox. Coming up next, it's the Lions and the Bears from Soldier Field. He's like flying around from hockey to football.
Oh, or him, or a Kevin Harlan.
Kevin Harlan, as you see behind me here, a Minnesota sports guy here.
Yeah,
Kevin Garnett. Kevin Harlan was the original Timberwolves play-by-play guy with Gus Johnson as the alternate back. So when the Wolves were like losing every game on the schedule, you'd have Kevin Harlan and Gus Johnson just dicking around on local TV in like 1995. It was a blast here.
Harlan, I mean, he's just one of those voices. I mean, and by the way, I love the fact that they had to like get in his ear and be like, "Listen, buddy, you got to stop doing play-by-play of streakers because all you're doing is encouraging these guys." Like, and I say, take the bra off and be a man.
Yeah.
I love Kevin Harlan's call of those moments, but you listen to him in basketball, like you said, he's great. And then you listen to him in football and you're like, oh my God, like, some of the language that he'll use to describe just the most ordinary things, like, whatever, the quarterback snap in shotgun, a spinning football to his hands, rotates it twice, delivers a shot to the sideline. It's like, what are we doing?
It's
are we
wild,
writing
man.
poetry, or are we doing I mean, it's. But
do you guys remember? I don't know if you ever watched I know Jay, you're a hockey guy for sure.
Yeah.
But when Doc Emmerich was doing he was the main voice on the NBC, like the Stanley Cup Finals and stuff. And first of all, silky smooth, 50 years calling hockey. And he was like just, what do you call it? Like a glossary or like synonyms or whatever. It was like a thesaurus of, he had 50 different ways to describe someone passing the puck to somebody else, right? Glides it across, slides it over here, ping pongs it through to whatever it is, right? And he would just rattle through like 50 or 60. You'd never hear the same one twice in a hockey game.
Yeah, that idea of, so what's wild about what you just said, and to bring it back to like an offensive line room, is one of the things that people do not think about when they think about whether a coach is going to work or not is that ability to keep you entertained. Like, I can't tell you how many offensive line coaches I've had over the years who I realized, like, oh my God, they're doing a stand-up act. Like, they're literally running a bit that they know works. Like, this is a joke that they know, applause break here, and then we're going to get, because they've done it for so long and they know how to, break you down and build you up. And they know when it's appropriate to create a little levity in the situation. Like, they're good entertainers. They're great communicators. It is the number one thing you need to be, because if you can't keep the attention of a bunch of 21 to 30-year-old men for sometimes marathon long 3-hour meetings, you are literally just pissing in the wind. You are just in, it's, how would you pronounce it? It's mabistatory. You know what I mean? You're up there just cranking it and nobody cares except for you. It's ridiculous. So, and by the way, I won't name names, but I had a coach like that where half the room was asleep, and it was an unfortunate because he had great information. He was a great teacher of technique, but he was overly critical and he had a monotonous delivery. And as a result, I think that there was a lot of untapped potential in that room, and it's unfortunate because
I always knew Bill Belichick had a hard time getting the max out of his teams. Confirmed by Rich.
Will he ever figure it out? Well,
Rich, to that point, I've brought up the, you used to be the guy in the room that would break some of that monotony and but how did you come up with some of the stuff you did? I mean, and I was only with you for a year, but the stories about you leading up were all his letters to home, all the different bits you did. How did you come up with that stuff? And how did you get it past the Joe D's of the world and those guys to be hey, let me do this. And then eventually they would fall in love with it.
You got to be who you are. And look, I'm in the right field. I'm in my chosen field is to be a broadcaster and entertain people on the radio and podcast and do this stuff because it's all I was doing anyways. I was just also playing football. But if it's in your personality to have fun and, kind of, joke around, be that guy. And I think a lot of people assume because I'm a football player, I have to be a robot and I have to, and who knows, maybe there are certain mentors around them who hammered that into their heads. I know certainly I rubbed certain coaches I played with the wrong way, and I won over a lot more of them who realized the value in having somebody who could maybe break the tension a little bit. But that's the other thing is you do have to be able to learn how to choose your spots. There are times where there's room for it and there's times where there isn't. And that, my friend, you learn from doing it wrong a lot of times. So you got to see a pretty polished version as I got later on in my career. But I can't tell you how many times, an offensive line coach would walk into the room and he was pissed because maybe he just got his ear chewed in an all-staff meeting just moments ago. And here I am telling a story about some conquest or, life on the range, man. And I got my feet kicked up and I got everybody going and I've been told hey, shut the fuck up. Like, okay, all right. That's that you got to take the good with the bad.
Oh man. Yeah. Jay, go ahead.
Well, I was just about to say, you played with, so we've talked about Joe D on this show, Joe DeLisandris, one of my favorite coaches. To this day, still meet with him at the Combine. He sent me a text after they drafted a kid in the second round this year, and he's found my new Jeremiah because he looked like me. But, what was your favorite, moment in the O-line room with Joe D or just, your time there in San Diego?
Boy, one of my favorite moments with Joe was – he got up in the front of the room, and this was before you got there. And listen, it was all new. It was all new to Joe. He had just signed with the staff. It was all new to us, and there were all the offensive linemen who were sitting in the room who had played the year prior in 2012. Mike McCoy was the new head coach, and he brought with him a brand new offense. Ken Wisenhunt was the OC, and I actually that was my inroad. I had the same agent as Ken Wisenhunt, who had gotten fired from Arizona as the head coach. We had a 5-win season in 2012, and then he got the gig as the OC with the Chargers. And so I was free agent. I was on a 1-year deal with the Cardinals, so I had a choice to play with Bruce Arians, stick it out in Arizona, and they were offering me, kind of a vet minimum deal situation, or go on with the Chargers, again, another vet minimum situation with a small signing bonus. And I decided to sign with the Chargers and play with a coach I knew and who knew me real well. And Ken was great. The offense made sense, but there were some nuances that clearly Joe hadn't wrapped his head around yet. And I remember one time we're all sitting in the meeting room and we're having this big, long discussion about, I think it was goal line installation. So, I mean, not to get too far in the weeds for people who've never sat in an offensive line room, but
we go in the weeds. We go in the weeds on this show all the time.
Aggressive weeds.
Okay, yeah.
We do try to explain it for idiots like me, but yeah.
Yeah, but like it basically, simply put, where, obviously the offense changes when you're within 5 yards of the goal line, and, you have different people in different places, and sometimes you're adding offensive linemen. And for whatever reason, and this happens to everybody, so I'm not trying to single out Joe D as like, he's not a dummy. That's a really smart coach, and he obviously wrapped his head around the offense, and we had a successful campaign in 2013. We went all the way to the playoffs. We won a game on the road in Cincinnati. But for about 20 minutes, we were breaking down the same play because he just could not make sense of why the center was supposed to be blocking, in his mind, who he was supposed to be blocking. And the reason was because we were adding an additional offensive lineman. So we kind of had like an offset situation to an unbalanced line, basically. So you have more offensive linemen to one side. So the defense is going to adjust. And I mean, I can't tell you. No. Listen to me. And he was like giving us his resume. I've coached here. I've coached there. I've coached everywhere. And never have we ever done. Now, this shit doesn't make any sense. And like, he's telling us why it doesn't make sense. And we're like, slow down, take a beat. We promise you, if you just let us. No. We spent 20 minutes and he taught it the completely all fucked up way. And then we go on the football field. And I remember it was OTAs or something. I remember, like, I mean, we couldn't run the play. We just go, I mean, like, it was like I think we ran it twice and we're like, yeah, like the offensive line does not know what the fuck they're doing. So we just can't do this play. So next day we come into the meeting room and it was like one of those come to Jesus moments where Jody was like, all right, man, I've got to have a little chat with you. And like it was, but he wore it. Like he understood the assignment in that situation was to take the L, to show a little humility. We're not all perfect. People make mistakes. And he did a great job. But I mean, we're all walking out of there like, I think we witnessed a guy having a stroke. Like, but he's an all-timer. I love Joe D.
Oh my gosh,
incredible man, and I'm so glad to hear that you keep in touch with him. I haven't heard his voice in so long. I might call him right after we're done.
He'll answer too, and like that dude has the brain of an elephant. He forgets nothing.
He's incredible.
Like I saw him at the combine. He's like, "How's your wife? How's Emma doing? How's your son Oliver?" I was like, "Dude, I talk to you once a year." Like it's just he's such a good dude, but like I'm sure you can. When I first got there, I can remember being like, this dude hates me, right? Like this dude, because like in the meeting room, he will just destroy you. But then he came and sat in lunch. He's like, how are you? How's your family? Tell me about your life. And you're like, is this a trick? Is this like, because I tell people like, I would let that dude watch my kids, like 100%. But at the same time, he's made me feel like I was this big before. Like, and I think those are the great coaches to have that can turn it on and turn it off.
Yeah. You need to have trust. You need to, well, what's amazing is when you walk into a football building as a rookie, your automatic assumption is everybody in the building smarter than you, knows better than you. And in many cases, that is true.
So
it's very, very rare that you've got the drop on anybody. But what you're talking about is a relationship that builds, and it can be quick, and it kind of has to be in football because your time with certain players, certain coaches can be fleeting, but you got to build trust. And when somebody works hard and somebody is committed to your growth and somebody is willing to knock you down and criticize you, but also build you up, and you feel like, oh, no, he wants to see me do better, that's an important relationship to have. And so the coaches who do that, who take the time to get to know their players, whether they think they're going to be a future Hall of Famer, a 5-time Pro Bowler, or, whatever the cards may be, because honestly, you don't know, especially a rookie, or you don't know how it's going to pan out anyways. But to take that time is super important. And Joe D, he had that trait. Dante Scarnecchia, in my opinion, the greatest position coach who's ever existed. He had that trait. He was my offensive line coach in New England with the Patriots. But coaches who are able to connect on a human level with their players and not just be, orators on high where they're pontificating down to you. I mean, those are the people who you connect with, and you really want to do that thing where it's cliche, but you want to run through a wall. You want to sacrifice it all to impress that person because they become a meaningful figure in your life.
What's your proudest moment messing with a rookie in your career?
Man, proudest moment messing with a rookie. God, you know why I'm having a hard time with this? Because I was not a big hazing guy. I'm such a nerd when it comes to this. I love teasing people. It is my favorite thing. It's all I do. I just tease people all day long.
What if it's not a rookie? What's your proudest moment pranking someone or messing with someone? Rookie, hazing, or otherwise?
All right, so so this one's kind of stepping away from hazing altogether, but it ended up being a big problem for the public relations department for the staff at Penn State. So it was my 5th fall, I think, at Penn State. It was in my 4th or my 5th fall at Penn State. So yeah, I don't know how many games I started at that point. 30.
You were the Van Wilder of Penn State football.
Yeah, it's Dr. Ornberger, Phil. Yeah. So I'm walking back with my roommate, A.Q. Shipley, who was the center on the Penn State football team. We played, I don't know how many games together, 40 games together. We played next to each other. I was right guard for some of my career there, left guard for the majority of my career. He was the center the whole time. And so we lived together too. And we're walking back from a workout, and he's complaining and belly aching because he wants to take a nap. He's got a class coming up. And I'm like, well, then take a nap. I'm like, what's the problem? He's like, no, dude. He's like, I have that damn media appointment. I was like, well, don't you got to go? Because he said what time it was. And I was like, don't you got to go? He was like, no, it's a phone call. I was like, well, how long do those last? He's like, dude, they can last 25, 30 minutes. And then I got to walk to class. I was like, oh, that does blow. I'm sorry to hear that. And then he's like, I don't think I'm going to do it. And then he's waffling. He's like, nah, I think I'm going to do it. I'm like, well, buddy, I can do a pretty good AQ Shipley. I'm like, why don't you take a nap? Let me take the call. We'll see how it goes. So no shit, for 20 minutes, I am interviewed as AQ Shipley by the various media covering Penn State. We're a good team. I think to that point in the season, we were undefeated. If it was my senior year, for sure, we were undefeated. And, so we're national media, local media. And they're taking quotes. They're literally writing articles with quotes. I'm like, it's all about tradition and honor. And, they're asking me personal questions, and I know him so well. I live with him. I'm like, yeah, back in my days in Moon Township, playing basketball was really the foundation of my offensive line play, all that footwork. I'm just bullshitting. And it's working. AQ didn't nap, by the way. He's listening to this media call, howling, laughing in the background. Anyways, somebody figures it out. Somebody replayed the clip for someone else. They were like, who the hell is talking on this phone call? And this is after several articles have been written. And so the PR department contacts AQ and say, hey, did you do the media call? He goes, yeah. And he goes, yeah. Are you sure it was you? And he goes, huh?
What do you mean?
So they figured out he has to come clean. And then the PR staff had to like post retractions. Every newspaper had to be like, those were not A.Q. Shipley's comments. That was a rogue impersonation by this fucking asshole. We apologize. So, I mean, that one got away from us a little bit, but yeah, that was a good
Those
one.
poor the college PR staff too. These a couple of sort of like kids on that staff.
Yeah.
Oh man, crying to their parents.
Yeah.
Amazing, man. Well, listen, we've 3 minutes left. We've already kept you like 15 minutes past your agreed upon time here. We're going to debut a segment here with you. And it's a working title. Today we're going to call it the 3 technique.
Come on. Football.
It's 3 questions for the road here for Rich, okay? And these are just randomized questions in our bin of random questions. So we'll start with this one. Who are 2 people, could be in football, could be in the universe, 2 people that you would love to see meet in the A-gap?
Oh my gosh. In the A-gap. Ooh.
Could be anything.
Aaron Donald, Larry Allen, rest in peace, buddy.
Oh, wow, dude.
Yeah.
I mean,
wow.
You have Aaron Donald stepping away from the football is arguable, maybe inarguably one of, if not the greatest interior defensive lineman we've ever seen. Larry Allen, strong argument that he's the greatest offensive lineman we've ever seen. I mean, he was a grizzly bear in shoulder pads. And I don't know what you call Aaron Donald, Tasmanian devil in shoulder pads. I would love to see them for 60 minutes battling it out. I have no idea who would win, but I would pay a hefty price to see that game.
Did you ever play against Aaron?
No, well, no, actually, oddly enough, your rookie year was going to be my first chance to play against him. The Raiders game that preceded the Rams game, they were on our schedule next. I had torn ligaments in my ankle, and I already had the back injury.
Yeah.
And the Rams were next on the schedule. And I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm pretty sure I agreed to have surgery on my back that week. I was like, yeah, we're all set. We're good here. Yeah.
Yeah, can we throw a couple bonus surgeries in too? Yeah, maybe my neck, my Achilles. Just
Rich,
your
back. I can remember your back was so bad. I mean, and we talk about. I mean, Boone's having a full knee at 37 years old at August 1st. Like we've all had our fair share of issues, but I mean, I can remember post-game speeches, you laying on your back like a turtle. Right, like you just like couldn't even move. McCoy's talking to us at post game, and Richie's just on his back, like, "Yep, got it back here." But I mean, is that all good for you now, or how is your injuries coming with that?
Yeah. I mean, look, like anybody, I have my complaints depending on the day, but the surgery was successful. I recovered from it. In fact, had I been signed, I would have played or tried to play the 2015 season. But my son had just been born, and I had a couple of workouts, and it wasn't going anywhere. And I was just like, you know what? It kind of felt at that point like tempting fate. Like, that was a tough one to get over and recover from in the first place. And now it sort of felt like that chapter was the page was like hovering, and it was like, are we going to close the book or not? And so I decided that was when I was going to hang it up after a workout in Detroit. It was kind of like a cattle call. They were having like an 0-8 season or 0-9 season to that point. They were terrible in 2015. And so they just called in a bunch of, available free agents to scare the roster basically. And I was a part of that cattle call. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I started losing weight, and I feel good. But thank you for asking. How's your body holding up?
It's good. Yeah, I just had shoulder surgery 3 months ago, so I had to get that fixed, and then I ended up having 2 ankles, which is what I ended up retiring with. But I got to get the weight back off. I got it off initially. I got down to like 280, felt real good. Now I'm back up to like 315 again. I'm like, I can't keep doing this yo-yo thing. It's just not fun to eat well.
You're like a cheeseburger away from putting your hand in the dirt again.
I know.
Let's go.
With very less muscle involved.
Oh, okay. 3 technique question number 2. Give us a quick anecdote that illustrates the brilliance of Bill Belichick.
Ooh, a quick anecdote about Bill Belichick. Okay, so here's a guy who, so 2009, we were going on the road on a short week, to play against, again, no shocker, a struggling Detroit team on Thanksgiving. We were the Thanksgiving game. And, man, I'll tell you, so I don't know if I was watching a lot of Detroit games like on television. Those were, like I said, they were struggling, so I don't think they were being promoted and put in primetime spots. They were probably buried on so I hadn't really seen any film on him. But Bill, when I tell you, he made the Detroit Lions look like they were going to be, as far as I was concerned, they were going to win the Super Bowl in 2009. I was like, holy shit. We're going into literally the teeth of the Lions. These guys are going to beat the living dog out of us. They've got this edge rusher. They've got this running back. Their QB is better than anybody in this league knows about. I'm a rookie. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, we're going to get mauled out there in Detroit. This is going to be a massacre. We beat the living shit out of Detroit. It wasn't even a close game. But he made you feel like every team you were going to face was going to, it was going to be a complete disaster. You were going to be embarrassed on the football field. He would build them up. He would show you all their strengths. And then throughout the course of the week, he would show you how to, take apart this team and, hey, this is where they'll struggle doing this and they're not going to see this coming. And hey, we can attack them here. And those plans usually worked. And so he was a really good motivator. The anecdote probably doesn't showcase how good he was at the psychological part of being a motivator, but he knew how to turn you up for every single outing. And he knew when he needed a break, when he needed to have humor. That one stuck out. I thought we were going to get destroyed by the Detroit Lions, and that is not how it went.
No, that's psychological warfare right there, right? How do I, in a game that could be a trap game or, it's a 4 or 5 month season, how do I get my team to lock in? Okay. Last question here in the 3 technique. Give us your 3 favorite movies of all time. If you could only watch 3 movies ever again on repeat, what 3 movies is Rich watching?
Oh my gosh. If you ask me tomorrow, my answer would probably be different. I love comedies. I love Adam Sandler. It is the movie that got me to play football. So I guess almost from a nostalgia standpoint, I have to put The Waterboy in there. That is a true story.
That's a true story. That's what made you want to play football?
I was waffling whether or not I was going to play football. My mom, it was literally the story. Bobby Boucher's story was the story of my life.
I love how a lot of kids grew up and Joe Montana was their hero. Tom Brady, Michael Vick running around. No, the Waterboy, Bobby Boucher.
Listen,
won the Bourbon Bowl.
I was gonna say he did come back at halftime and help them let that win the Bourbon Bowl. But everything about that, my mom didn't want me to play football because foosball was for the devil. And then I was waffling over whether or not I should do it because she honestly was kind of ahead of her time. She was a boxing fan until she started hearing interviews of boxers after their career ended. And they all sounded like they spoke with speech impediments and they seemed slowed down, and it worried her. Muhammad Ali, so it was one of those things that really, really turned her off from football. She loved watching football, but she hated seeing what happened to boxers after their careers. And she just assumed football was going to do the same thing. So, to her credit, I didn't play until 8th grade. And then getting ready for that season, The Waterboy came out on HBO. And so I watched it incessantly and ended up playing football because Coach Klein told me to. So Waterboy is on the list. Gosh, I really love Tarantino. So one of his flicks is on the list. I think he's a genius of a director and just such a unique perspective. I guess because Pulp Fiction feels like so many different movies entangled into one movie. Maybe Pulp Fiction gets there. That one's hard to get bored from. I'm not really a sports movie fan at all. So I don't, there, other than the water boy, so I mean, I'm not going to be the Rudy guy or remember the Titans. So throw Goodfellas on.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Scorsese. Yeah. So Adam Sandler, Scorsese, and Tarantino.
Wow. Look at
That's
you.
a broad spectrum of movies right there.
The new Happy Gilmore's coming out soon, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
They're making another one. That'll be
straight
interesting.
to Netflix. I think we're going straight to Netflix.
I'm here for that.
Same.
Let's do it, man. Rich Hornberger, man. Thanks
You're
for
the
coming
best.
on, chopping it up, telling stories, pulling back the curtain. We appreciate it, man.
Always, anytime.
Awesome, Richie. Appreciate you, buddy.
Got you, Jerry.
All right, boys. That's the O-line committee. Our first guest. Yes.